Welcome back to the Storm Tracker podcast. I'm Marcus Benjamin. He's Gio Million, and we are going into the bye week here for the Miami Hurricanes. So there's a lot to talk about. Obviously, they're coming off of a very disappointing loss to Middle Tennessee State. A lot of questions to be answered between now and the game between North Carolina, but first, I kind of want to touch on recruiting before we talk about that next game after the bye, because this week we'll have two blue chip players committing to schools, and both of which, will not be choosing Miami. So where does that leave Miami at those particular positions? It would mean wide receiver and D tackle or defensive line because that's where Tyler Williams and David Hicks would be filling voids for. So let's first start with wide receiver. Now, wide receiver is kind of a question mark. It's a big one right now, and it seems as if Miami is behind. Well, not seems. They are behind when it comes to wide receivers, with only Robbie Washington and Nathaniel Joseph committed to the class, and several other targets have now committed to different schools. Where do you think Miami goes at wide receiver?
Yeah, so what Miami's doing right now is a bit of a long play. And what I mean by a long play is they're recruiting a great group of guys right now that are basically committed to other schools. The big names, Jurion Dickey, Oregon, Brandon Ennis, Ohio State, Carnell Tate, Ohio State, Andy Jean, former Miami commitment, now Florida commitment over the summer. And some other guys going a little under the radar, but I've mentioned before in some of our updates in the past, Jalen Brown actually, that Miami was hot on the trail after him between the spring and the summertime. Kind of slowed down a bit. Miami kind of pulled back. He committed to LSU. Miami's been communicating with him, but hasn't really been reciprocated on his end that much. He was in the stands for the A&M game about 2 weeks ago, but that's where it stands with those guys. But in regards to another guy, a little more under the radar, but he's been catching a little more praise coming into his senior season. Micah Mays out of the Benjamin School.
Yeah.
He's a track star, actually. Very talented kid. Actually committed to Wake Forest as well. Seems like Miami's just going after a lot of guys that are just committed elsewhere. Marcus, is there anyone that's not committed that Miami's going after?
I mean, the only one that kind of comes to mind for me is Carmelo English out of Phoenix City Central in Alabama. That's like the one player that comes to mind that Miami could be continuing to recruit because they offered him this staff offered him in January, and he recently decommitted from Auburn. Now there are some other schools that are in play for him, like Kentucky was one of the players for him in his recruitment. So there's and Michigan was another school high on his list. So it just kind of really depends on if they can sell playing time, because that's kind of the best sell for the Hurricanes right now. Because I mean, based on that performance against Middle Tennessee State, you can't really that's not one of the factors, and uh, you have to kind of sell that. Hey, we need you. We need you to kind of fill this void. You see, we have several receivers dropping balls. We need players like you to help this team win. So that's the one player for me that I think that Miami should go after that's not committed. Now, of all of those commits though that you named, Brandon Ennis, Jalen Brown, I mean they went after Andy Jean, um, Will Fowles as well, Hakeem Williams, all of these players. Which wide receiver do you think Miami has the best chance to flip?
The best chance to flip. Um, Out of that entire group, it's more realistically an Andy Jean or a Micah Mays. Um, for Miami to get a guy like Brandon Inniss, you can't lose a game how they lost to Middle Tennessee State. That's very momentum killing. Miami was going after Brandon Inniss really hard. We've been reporting it. It's been all over the place. Uh, they've been on Jurion Dickey. They came with a push in the summer months. And, Mario Cristobal, someone fed him that info that, Jurion Dickey likes to go fishing. So
Yeah.
Jurion Dickey took a trip down to South Florida, whatnot, went fishing. Trip went great. Um, at this time, just off of speaking to a source, it's still a long shot that Miami would flip Jurion Dickey from Oregon. So
Yeah,
that's where it
that's
stands. It's just Andy Jean and Micah Mays. If Miami could get Jaylen Brown to be interested again after they shied away from him in the summer, that remains to be seen. Florida State's also in the mix there. But I will recommend one, though, and you and me had talked about this before. Actual Florida State commit right now. He's having a huge senior season. Vandrevius Jacobs out of Vero Beach, 10 touchdowns on the season. Just last week against Miami Palmetto and the Washington Twins, 2 touchdowns for the win, 21-17.
okay. Yeah, I definitely think Miami should start looking at more options because it'll be December before you know it, and a lot of these players are going to, you know, early sign in December, and then you're kind of scrambling at that point to really kind of pick up the pieces to see who is left. So interesting to see how the wide receiver plays out for this 2023 class. 2024, whole different story for another podcast. So I do want to talk about also D tackle because David Hicks was a guy that Miami had very high on their list, being recruited by both Joe Salavea and Rod Wright, and this unfortunately is going to be a miss for Miami. He originally wanted to make his commitment uh, during the Under Armour All American game, and he has now suddenly changed his mind after visits to Oklahoma and Texas A&M. So now Miami is going to have to fill that void because D tackle they have zero D tackles in this particular class. I mean, there's many edge rushers that they're considering. I've even heard of talk about Reuben Bain if they are to land him that they may want to move him to the inside. I know that's something that Reuben Bain would rather not do. I know he feels that he is more of an outside rusher. So that could leave Miami on the outside looking in for a Reuben Bain. But are the some of the D tackles that you know about that could potentially fill that D tackle void for Miami with this class?
Yeah, so I'm sure some Hurricanes fans, I've seen the comments around. They're like, "What's going on with the defensive tackle class? We have no defensive tackles. Are we even recruiting it?" Miami is actually recruiting defensive tackles. The thing is, are they determined defensive tackles by our database? No, not exactly. Just as you mentioned, the aforementioned Reuben Bain. Miami views him as the type of mold where they could use him outside and inside, similar to Akeem Mesidor that currently transferred in from West Virginia. A couple of other names, Jordan Hall from the Jacksonville area in Florida. He
Yes.
is looking to take a visit to Miami very soon. I would keep an eye somewhere around that the Florida State game, Pittsburgh game. Those are the dates to eye right there. Some of the other guys, Nathan Efobi out of the Georgia area, a little bit of an underrated name. Another guy in the Florida area as well, Andrew Rumpf, Northern Florida area. Actually, Palmetto High School, not Miami Palmetto though. Same Palmetto Jack Allison played at, former Miami quarterback. A couple other names committed to other places. John Walker. This is the name I want to bring back up again. Miami and Florida, they're both still in contact with him.
Okay.
He is committed to UCF. He has relayed that he says that he's solid to UCF, but I like to go by the saying of if a guy's still taking calls, he's still looking around.
Yeah.
Another guy I want to throw out here, actually, almost forgot him here. Terry Simmons, actually, he's a Duke commit, a little bit of an underrated guy, but Miami's been on him for a bit. Um, it kind of seems a little similar to the situation with wide receiver. They're kind of going after some guys that are committed to other places. Mario Cristobal, obviously, you and me know this, Marcus, that Mario Cristobal has the model that he doesn't really care if someone's committed to another school. He's still going to recruit them anyways because that's how confident he is he could pull that off.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Terry Simmons is a guy that I actually do expect to eventually flip to Miami, based on some sources that I have. I feel that is a highly likely situation unless something has changed within the past couple of weeks. From what I know, I think Terry Simmons likely will be added to the class and decommitting, but we'll see what happens because these kids, they are kids, and they do change their minds constantly. So you kind of never know. But defensive tackle is becoming very concerning. For the Miami Hurricanes, and I did hear kind of an update on Afobe, Nathan Afobe. I know he uh, was at Michigan last week, and from what I heard with the phobia is that Michigan is now one of his top schools now. So Miami will have to battle the Wolverines, it seems, for Efobi. But besides that, I mean, you talked about another guy who could possibly play on the inside as well. A lot of people don't know that he's even being recruited by Miami. Recently decommitted from Notre Dame. Uh, what do you have on Keon Keeley?
Yeah, so with Keon Keeley, the latest buzz, right after that decommitment from Notre Dame, kind of seemed like a lot of buzz was coming out of out of Alabama. Little tongue twister there. Um, in this past month, since the college football season started, um, Keeley has actually visited twice to Ohio State. UF is pushing very hard. There's a couple other schools looking in there, trying to get in the mix. Miami is actually recruiting Keon Keeley. I like his potential. I think he has to get his weight up just a little more, but I could see the potential for him to play outside and inside if he were to choose Miami. Now, the chances of that maybe not so great based off of what I know, but Miami's going to throw their hat in the mix. And in regards to throwing their hat into the mix, what Miami's kind of doing right now in terms of defensive line recruiting, as I mentioned when we opened this segment of the podcast, in terms of defensive tackles in general, just recruiting guys that maybe be edges that could play on the inside. The other aspect too is Miami's also just looking through the JUCO ranks, trying to see if there's anyone they could pluck. They are willing to wait until the transfer portal around that range of that time after the season's over, try to see if they could pluck a few guys like they did just this past offseason. So that's where it stands right now.
Okay. Yeah, I think that may be the play for several positions. Where Miami only has one defensive back currently committed to the class. Although we do feel Damari Brown is still favored to commit to Miami. They're still in the race for Komani McLean as well, but even still, that would still be only three DBs that you have with Robert Stafford. So you may have to go through the JUCO ranks there. And then you just kind of touched on D tackle. That's definitely a possibility. Linebacker seems to be set, which It's also probably not done because they are still pushing for Stanquan Clark, who, continues to shine in this 2022 season. Offensive line seems pretty solid. Miami still the favorite to get Samson Okun Lola, but running back is still kind of, a mystery as well. Zero running backs committed to the class. Christopher Johnson still filling out his options with both Clemson and Ole Miss. But even if you just get Chris Johnson, I still feel like that running back room is still needs a little bit more beef to it because Chris Johnson is a great player, but I don't think he is your complete running back size wise. We saw him get knocked out of the game by Stanquan Clark, coincidentally, in the game against Miami Central. So I have just kind of some questions about his durability, and the current running back room has questions about durability. So yeah, a running back could be another place where where Miami goes through the transfer portal, just like they did with the kid from Stanley from UAB to add more depth at positions. So we'll see what happens there. We'll see what's going on with the JUCO prospects in the next coming months. But let's fast forward to the current Miami Hurricanes, Gio. Really sad, really sad performance on Saturday from the University of Miami. It's it's really inexplainable. Obviously, you can see a lot of coverage on CanesCounty.com that we've put out, and so we've kind of delved pretty deep into this loss and kind of what happened. But going into the bye week, Gio, where do they go from here? There's a lot of questions to be answered. What jumps out to you the most that needs to be answered by, uh, you know, North Carolina game?
Cornerback room, 355 passing yards through the air on only 5 plays. That is unacceptable.
And
Miami
pretty
has to go
pretty
back to
efficient
drawing
by
board.
Middle Tennessee State too, by the way.
Yeah,
Pretty
they
efficient.
they have to open up the cornerback competition. You know, this is a guy I clamored for since the spring. Mentioned this after the season opener. I would like to see more of Isaiah Dunson. I'm not sure why he hasn't played more. I had the chance to watch him throughout practices. Physical corner with length, usually kept everything in front of him. Didn't get beat on the inside, from what I could recollect from the spring. I'm just surprised he hasn't played more. I feel like he's a guy that could maybe make a difference if they give him a chance.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. I think pretty much anybody kind of deserves a chance at this point. I mean, Jaden Harris got his chance last week and he failed miserably, getting bombed, like other DBs did as well. Like, Tyreek Stevenson, DJ Ivy. It was just a terrible performance overall from the DBs. Hopefully, Darrell Porter returns for this North Carolina game. And hopefully you also get Tyreek Stevenson back. But if you don't, whoa, you have all of a sudden depth issues at the quarterback position. So I would imagine that, there will be an open competition. And because some of the players that did get playing time, like Malik Curtis and Jaden Harris, uh, have not looked good. They just have not looked good in games if they shine in camp. So it is a cause for concern because that North Carolina offense moves. They move, man,
Oh
and
yes.
and they score points. So what's most concerning for me though, Gio, is obviously the obvious elephant in the room, and that's quarterback. Tyler Van
Yeah.
Dyke, Jake Garcia. Uh, I don't think Jakari Brown is really there yet as a quarterback. From what we hear from the inside, he's not. So it's really just Jake Garcia and Tyler Van Dyke, and it's kind of easy to assume that Jake Garcia will be the starter next game. But Tyler Van Dyke has kind of earned this starting job, and it's going to be his to lose in practice for these next few days. And I really think there's something, mentally going wrong with Tyler, or he is a system quarterback. It's one of the two, right? It's got to be one of those two scenarios. Either he's not ready for prime time or the NFL, because in the NFL, you have to be able to more so be efficient in the offense that Josh Gaddis has rather than Rhett Lashley's offense from last year, because Gaddis's offense is more of a pro style offense. So the fact that he only, well, to this point, has only really excelled in that spread offense is a cause for concern. And then you got Jake Garcia in there who looked comfortable. PFF loved him compared to Tyler Van Dyke. So I'm gonna put you on the spot, Gio. Who do you think wins this quarterback competition?
Oh, I would like to say Jake Garcia because I agree with PFF. Watching that game, I saw some things that Jake was doing, and I mentioned it in the takeaways piece that we released yesterday. The offense moved better. There was a vertical passing threat unlocked when he came in. Unfortunately, the one thing I will say, I don't think Jake Garcia will get the start for the North Carolina game, just based off the experience Tyler Van Dyke has. But I do think there would be a very, very short leash on Tyler Van Dyke going into the North Carolina game. If he comes out the same way he did against Middle Tennessee State, or even partial of that A&M game, I think they'll yank him out within a series or two. They will not waste time.
Yeah, I couldn't agree. I couldn't agree more. Because I don't know about a series or two. I think they'll give him at least a quarter to figure it all out. But if he is looking like how he looked in that first half against Middle Tennessee State, then maybe they do pull him earlier. And if they do pull him again, though, that's it for Tyler Van Dyke, um, unless Jake Garcia gets injured. I think that is pretty much probably going to be the end of his career at the University of Miami. If he does get the starting, he gets pulled again, then I really, really don't see, and especially if Jake Garcia has a good game and with his arm wins the game against North Carolina, because let's be honest, Miami's going to need an arm to win that game, because based on what we saw last week, Miami is going to give up some points to North Carolina. They have a really explosive offense. Defense, not so much, but can you keep up? So this is the other question I wanted to ask Gio is, do you think because North Carolina, I actually want to pull this up as far as what they scored in each game, because that will really kind of tell us how many points are needed, for Miami to win this game. All right, so first game, North Carolina scored 56 against FAMU. Not a surprise there. They scored 63 against Appalachian State, 35 against Georgia State, and 32 against Notre Dame. So based on that alone, that means you got to score basically 33 points at minimum to win this game. Do you think Miami scores 33 points against North Carolina?
Well, their defense is a little suspect from what I've seen in terms of North Carolina, but that's not saying much considering Miami's defense seems that way after the Middle Tennessee State game, which is almost mind boggling considering the performance that they had in College Station, Texas. Like, I I was just shocked. I was were we watching the same team? But but um, it's really going to come down to the quarterback play. That was the biggest difference I saw in terms of Miami's last game. Um, let's be honest here. Tyler Van Dyke has not looked like the same guy as last year. And if Miami can't even get decent quarterback play in this game against North Carolina, just even accuracy or just routine throws to be completed, they're in trouble because North Carolina is going to score a lot of points because Miami has many questions in their cornerback room, and North Carolina can sling it.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So quarterback is gonna be. I mean, Tyler Van Dyke has to rejuvenate himself from that quarterback that we saw last season. Because if you ask me, like after the last regular season game last season, can Miami score 33, 35, 40 points against North Carolina? I would say hell yeah, they can.
Definitely.
But today, I don't know. I mean, you scored 9 against Texas A&M. Yeah, you scored 70 against lowly Bethune Cookman. But I would imagine most FBS schools would. And you scored 30 against Southern Miss, which North Carolina clearly has a better offense than Southern Miss, and perhaps a better defense. We'll see how it all plays out. And then you score 31 against Middle Tennessee, and um, uh, 21 of those points were basically from Tyler Van Dyke. I mean, from Jake Garcia. I mean, so yeah, Jake Garcia, who, like you said, actually threw the ball deep, actually, made Will Mallory look like a draft pick at times. I mean, it just it made Keyshawn Smith look like he's a draftable prospect, which we probably weren't saying in those first 3 games. So I don't know, man. There's just a lot of soul searching that has to be happening for the Hurricanes to pull out this victory because North Carolina is going to come in here not scared at all. They're going to come in here thinking that they can win. North Carolina has done it before at Hard Rock Stadium. So, and they are, I actually don't know if they play this week, but they are coming off of that loss to Notre Dame, and they do play this week. They play at home at Virginia Tech. So we'll see how that plays out. They're favored by 9 over Virginia Tech. It's really a great opportunity for Miami to scout North Carolina and really kind of see what they do well. And but I tell you, Gio, man, if they lose that game, um, where do they go from there?
Well, if Miami loses that game, it's not a good look on just starting off for Mario Cristobal, starting off 2-3, especially when your in-state rival up north is sitting at 4-0 right now. Have to see how FSU's season finishes, but so far they are off to a good start. Have
Yeah.
to commend them for that. Um, it starts becoming a little more difficult just in terms of recruiting or just in terms of just the mentality of this team. I mentioned that coming off the A&M game. Um, on one of the articles we had on the site, I said the biggest question for Miami was how they would respond after coming off a devastating loss like they had against A&M, and they followed that up with a loss to Middle Tennessee State. And it's not even just that they lost; it's the way that they lost. It was horrific. Like
Yeah.
it, almost anything went wrong that you could have thought of.
Yeah.
So
Uh,
it
perfect
it
word to describe it. Horrific.
yeah, yeah, or like Cameron Kinchin says, everyone played horrible. But
Yeah.
it the biggest thing is if Miami loses against North Carolina, you have to start questioning the mentality of this team, how mentally strong they are. Because from a talent aspect, yeah, Miami has a talented team. They shouldn't be losing to a team like Middle Tennessee State. And I know North Carolina's been recruiting better over the course of the last few years since Mac Brown arrived. But Miami, at least in terms of the recruiting rankings in the database, Miami's just at minimum a top 20 team just based on talent.
Right.
So it's underperformance is what's going on. Now, is some of that, Mario Cristobal has to scrub a bit away of that mentality from the past, just being content about whether you won or lost, not being angry, not being upset. I'm sure there were some players who were upset, but you also had times where a loss would just happen and players are already posting up pictures and stuff an hour or 2 hours after a loss on Instagram. um, you know, it, that raised a lot of questions in the past.
Yeah.
How Miami responds in this game, especially after that Middle Tennessee State game, it's going to say a lot about this season. If Miami loses this game, I don't see a good outlook on the season at all. I mean, where did we predict? We said ceiling about 10-2, floor about 9-3. I think Miami would be underperforming again.
Yeah, that they definitely would. If they lose to North Carolina, to me, is clearly a team that, for right now, I don't believe is better than Florida State, and certainly not better than Clemson. And those are two teams that are left on the schedule. I would even question if North Carolina is better than Pitt as well. So you're looking at potentially 4, 5, 6 losses that could potentially happen. But let's keep it positive, man. Right before we end this, I do want to say that the Hurricanes are still in the driver's seat to win the Coastal Division. I know some people may snark at that, but it's true. It's a true statement. They are 0-0 in the conference, and this is a perfect opportunity for them to right their wrongs and make a run to the ACC championship game. Now they do have a tougher schedule than who I think is the best team in the Coastal, which is Pitt. They have a tougher out of division schedule. Pitt's got Louisville and Syracuse, which Syracuse has been looking a lot great, looking a lot better uh, this season. And Louisville has not, however, but Louisville is one of those sneaky teams that can probably just beat you at any given night, just like pretty much any team in the ACC.
Yeah.
There's always carnage going on and crazy happenings. But Miami has Clemson, uh, and they they are going to struggle. Let's just say that they're going to struggle in that game, in that environment against that defense. It's going to be tough for them to win that game. Even more so now from what we've seen against Middle Tennessee State. So but that's an ACC game, and then Florida State is always going to be a tough game. Florida State obviously wants to continue their success this season, and then also prove that last year wasn't a fluke, like many people think it was, as far as the game against Miami. So that's going to be a tough game as well, as that rivalry is always a tough game, one of the best rivalries in sports. So there's no gimme games in this on this ACC schedule. I mean, even Duke was undefeated until last week, losing a close one to Kansas, who was still undefeated, interestingly enough. So, but like I said, let's keep it positive. Hurricanes can still win the Coastal. Uh, the best part of those last two losses are the fact that they were non-conference. So, and if they can turn it
Yeah,
around,
that's the
it
silver
it
lining.
would be, yeah. If they can turn around, it'll really be a testament of this coaching staff and what potential could be. So, anything else you want to add before we close this out?
No, I agree with you in terms of, just the losses being to non-conference opponents. Just the only question that it poses is, you know, some of the struggles we saw in that Southern Miss game, just more so from the offense, and then all the struggles we saw in the Middle Tennessee State game, which kind of makes you think, whoa, okay, what's going to happen when Miami gets to conference play? Those are going to be
Yeah,
tougher opponents.
yeah, definitely. As far as all of the opponents left on the schedule, to me, better teams than Middle Tennessee State, and maybe Georgia Tech is the one team that Middle Tennessee beats, or maybe Duke. But like I said, Duke's even having a good season. But everyone else, I think, likely loses to or every team Middle Tennessee likely loses to. So it's going to be tough. So they got to be not only better than what they were last Saturday, but they have to be even better with better competition. So we'll see. It should be fun. It'll be fun for us, kind of watching from the
Yeah.
sidelines or the press box. You know what I mean? So, but anyways, for all on the Miami Hurricanes, go to canescounty.com. We're also on Twitter and Instagram. Follow this podcast on everywhere that you can listen to podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and of course YouTube as well on the YouTube channel live from Canes County. Until the next episode, peace.
Peace.